Montana Territory. Spring of 1882, the wind cut sharp through the cottonwood trees lining the edge of the small town of Red Elk Crossing. And Odella James pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders as she limped across the wooden platform outside the telegraph office. She hated walking past the mercantile this time of day. "Careful, Odella," barked a voice from the porch. "You might trip over your own foot again." A burst of laughter followed. She kept her chin high and eyes straight ahead, refusing to look at the group of local boys lounging on the steps like they owned the world. Her right leg dragged slightly, the old injury stiff in the cold. She had been born with it, a twisted foot and shortened ankle that made each step uneven. It had never stopped her from working the family farm after her parents died. Never stopped her from raising her younger brothers until the last one married off and moved to Helena. But it had stopped people from seeing her as anything more than a burden. At 28, she had given up on the idea of love, but the letter in her satchel said otherwise. She stepped inside the telegraph office, heart pounding as she pulled it out again, the reply to her mail-order bride posting. She had only sent it once. One letter out of desperation more than hope, and yet he had written back. The man's name was Nolan Prescott, a rancher from Wyoming Territory. 32, unmarried, widower. He had 2 children ages 6 and 4. His wife had passed during a harsh winter 3 years back. "I ain't looking for perfection," he had written in tight, careful script. "Just someone kind, real, someone who wants a life, not just a name." Odella read the words again, even though she knew them by heart. She had written back. And now, standing in the telegraph office, she held the telegram she had been waiting for all week. "I'll meet you at the Red Elk station on the 10th. I'll be wearing a gray hat." N. Prescott, the 10th was today. She took a deep breath, clutched the telegram to her chest, and turned to go. The small train station sat on the outskirts of town, just past the willows that lined the riverbend. She waited under the eaves, her hands cold, her heart louder than the whistle that echoed across the prairie as the train rolled in. Steam hissed. Metal clanked. Men stepped off first. Then women. A family or two, then she saw him. Gray hat, brown coat, broad shoulders. A boy with dark hair clung to his arm, and a little girl with a straw bonnet peeked from behind his leg. Odella's breath caught. He was taller than she had expected. His face was weathered, but his eyes were steady and soft. He spotted her right away, walked toward her with the boy in tow. "You must be Odella," he said, voice low and warm. She nodded. "And you must be Mr. Prescott. Call me Nolan." The boy stared at her. "Papa, is she the one?" Nolan looked to her, waiting. Odella swallowed. "Yes, I suppose I am." The boy nodded, satisfied, and held out a hand. "I'm Beau." She smiled and shook it. "Nice to meet you, Beau." The girl peeked out. "I'm Birdie," she whispered. "Hello, Birdie." Odella crouched carefully, ignoring the pull in her leg. "I like your bonnet." Birdie stepped closer, then took Odella's hand. Nolan watched it all quietly, then offered her his arm. "We've got a wagon waiting. It's half a day's ride south to the ranch." She hesitated. He noticed. "You can change your mind, no shame in it." She looked at Beau and Birdie, then up at him. "No, I want to come." The ride south was quiet. The children dozed in the back. Odella sat beside Nolan, fingers curled on her lap. "You limped a little getting on the train," he said after a while. She stiffened. "Yes, I was born like that," he nodded. "Does it hurt?" "Sometimes." "Will it get worse?" "No, it just is," he nodded again. "Then it's nothing that needs fixing." Odella blinked. "You do not mind?" "I did not come looking for a perfect bride. I came looking for a kind one." He glanced at her. "And you came." The ranch was tucked between hills, a modest home with a barn and a chicken coop and a wide porch where the children ran ahead. Odella stood beside the wagon, taking it all in. "It is not much," Nolan said. "It is a life," she answered softly. He looked at her then, slower this time. "That it is." Over the next days, she fell into a rhythm. She helped with the cooking, cleaned out the henhouse, read to the children at night. Beau warmed to her fast. Birdie took longer, but on the 4th night, she curled in Odella's lap during a storm and did not move until morning. Nolan worked sunup to sundown, but he always came in for supper. Always asked how her day was, always helped wash the dishes. One evening, as they walked the fence line checking for broken posts, he asked, "Why did you send that letter?" She paused before answering. "Because I was tired of being alone. And tired of being looked at like I was broken." "You are not broken," he said. She looked at him, eyes unsure. "You raised your brothers. You left behind everything familiar to help a man you did not know. You are stronger than most people I've met." He touched her hand just briefly. And for the first time in years, Odella believed she might be more than the Limp. That night she found a note tucked beside her pillow. "You belong here if you want to," and she folded it and kept it close. On the 10th day, they stood on the porch at sunset, watching the children chase each other through the tall grass. "You never asked for much," Nolan said. "I did not think I could. You can ask me anything, Odella." He turned toward her. "You are not leftover, you are not a favor. You are the woman I hoped would come." She took a shaky breath, her lips parting, and he kissed her. It was not rushed, not fiery, just warm and steady like him, like the life she was slowly building. She kissed him back, and for the first time since she was a girl, she felt wanted. Not for what she could do, not despite her limp, but because she was her. Odella James, and she was falling in love. The days warmed slowly, the snowmelt feeding the creek that cut through the eastern pasture. Odella found herself rising earlier, drawn to the quiet before the rooster called the house awake. She'd sit on the back steps, wool shawl tucked close, watching the light creep up behind the hills. There was peace here, not the kind that came from stillness alone, but from belonging. Nolan had offered her the spare bedroom when she arrived, and she hadn't asked for more. It faced east, and mornings came early through the thin curtains. She kept the quilt folded at the foot of the bed. Though she rarely needed it, Wyoming spring still held winter's breath. But the house stayed warm from the stove Nolan kept burning through the night. One morning, as she scrubbed the brass kettle beside the pump, Bo trotted up with a splinter in his finger. He didn't cry, just held it out with a furrowed brow. "Let me see," Odella said, drying her hands on her apron. He flinched as she drew the splinter free with a sewing needle. "Does it hurt less now?" He nodded, then looked up at her. "My ma never liked boiling water, said it made the house damp." Odella paused, unsure what to say. He scratched the back of his neck. "You don't smell like her." She knelt to his level. "I reckon I'm not much like her at all." Bo studied her face. "That's all right, you're good at splinters." That evening, Nolan returned from checking the boundary fence with dust on his collar and a pulled muscle in his shoulder. Odella set aside her darning and reached for the liniment without a word. "You don't need to," he said, wincing as he shrugged out of his coat. "I know." She worked the salve into his shoulder, her fingers careful. The room was quiet except for Birdie's quiet breathing by the hearth. She'd fallen asleep curled up with her rag doll. "I was thinking of putting in a second garden," Nolan said after a moment. "Just along the slope behind the barn. You'd have the say in it if you wanted." Odella's hands stilled. "You'd trust me with that? I've seen how you keep the hens from pecking each other raw. You've got a way with stubborn things." She laughed softly and rested her cheek against his good shoulder before she realized she'd done it. He didn't pull away. Just set a hand gently against her back and let it rest there. The next morning, she found a folded scrap of paper tucked into the handle of the feed scoop. In it, a rough drawing of garden rows and a note in Nolan's hand. "Your space if you'll make it." She planted with purpose over the next weeks. Peas, collards, 2 rows of beets. Birdie helped water the seedlings with a tin cup, and Bo chased off rabbits with a stick like it was a rifle. Odella didn't ask them till they just came. One afternoon, she stood at the edge of the rows, wiping her brow with her sleeve, when Nolan stepped out from the barn, hands dusty from fixing the stall door. "You've made that plot something pretty." "It's not pretty yet," she said. "But it's growing." He walked with her down the rows, stopping where the first pea flowers had started to open. "I never thought I'd see another woman in this yard," he said after a time. Didn't think anyone would want to come this far for a man hauling two young'uns and too much quiet. Odella bent to pull a weed. I didn't come for quiet, I came to be useful. You're more than that, he said. She looked up, but he was already walking back toward the house, long strides slow with thought. That night, after the children were asleep, he knocked on the doorframe of her room. She'd just finished brushing her hair, copper strands loose down her back. I've been thinking, he said, stepping inside only far enough to be heard. She set the brush down. About what? I'd like to know what your life was like before here, if you'd share it. Odella hesitated. Why? Because I want to know you, not just what you do for us, so she told him. About the farm she left behind. About the creek that ran dry one spring and the winter that took her father and mother both. She told him about the neighbors who stopped offering help once she was grown, about the nights she'd lie awake listening to her youngest brother cry himself quiet. I didn't always know what I was doing, she said, but I did it anyway. Nolan sat against the wall beside her doorframe, legs stretched out. That's what makes a good woman, not knowing but doing. She looked down at her hands. I used to think I was built for solitude. But now I'm not so sure. He tilted his head, studying her. You're not alone here, Odella. You haven't been since the day you stepped off that train. She stood, walked to him slowly, her limp not something she thought about in that moment. When she reached him, she rested her hand against his cheek. I know that now, she said. He rose, careful not to break the space they'd made between words. Will you walk with me tomorrow, before breakfast? She nodded. Yes, they stood like that a little longer, no need for more just yet. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, soft and sure, like something settling into place. The trail behind the barn sloped west, winding through a stretch of pale grass and sage. Odella walked beside Nolan as the sun pushed over the ridge behind them, casting long shadows ahead. The morning smelled of dew and horses. Birdie was with the neighbor's wife for the day, a quiet woman named Alma who took to the girl like she was her own. Bo had gone with the ranch hand to haul salt blocks out to the eastern pasture, eager to ride the buckboard. They walked without hurry. Nolan carried a basket with a heel of bread and a tin of boiled eggs. Odella had insisted they bring something, though he'd said the walk was enough. You always bring food where you go? He asked, glancing sideways. Only when I don't know how long I'll be gone, she said. Or when I don't trust the company to pack it themselves. He chuckled, low and genuine. That fair? She raised an eyebrow. You've been eating dry biscuits for supper when I'm not in the kitchen. I'd say it's fair. They stopped at a flat stretch near the top of a rise where the grass grew shorter. Nolan spread the blanket and sat, legs loose in front of him. Odella eased down beside him, careful with her leg. The wind tugged at her skirt, but the sun was full now, warm against her shoulders. He passed her an egg. Bo asked me last night if I was gonna marry you. Her fingers paused on the shell. What did you tell him? I said that wasn't something I'd answer without asking you first. She peeled the rest in silence, then broke the egg in two and handed him half. I didn't think you'd ask me. He took it, his hand brushing hers. Why not? Because I'm not what most men in your place would want. He leaned back on his elbows, watching the clouds above. Most men don't know what they need until they've already lost it. She looked at him. And you? I've already lost once. I'm not looking to chase a dream, I want what lasts. Odella broke off a piece of bread. You think I'd last? You've outlasted worse than me. The breeze shifted. A hawk circled overhead, its shadow passing over the grass. Would you take my name? He asked. If I asked, I would, she said without hesitation. But not because it's yours, because I'd want it to be mine too. He sat up fully then, facing her. I never wanted someone to fill a space. I wanted someone who made the space different just by being in it. I didn't come here to find a man who needed fixing, she said. I came because I wanted to be seen. And I see you, Nolan. I see how you carry things quiet, how you let the kids come to you in their own time, how you never ask for more than what someone's willing to give. His jaw tightened, though his eyes softened. You see all that? I do. He reached for her hand, not like a question this time, but like a promise. Then marry me, she nodded once. Yes, he stood, pulling her gently to her feet. Will We'll do it right, he said. No rush. I'll speak with the pastor this week. Bo will want to wear his good boots. And Bertie will want a flower crown, Odella said, smiling. We'll find her one. They walked back slow, the sun higher now, the hills warm with gold and green. When they reached the house, Bo was already back, tugging Bertie's hand toward the porch. Mama, Bertie shouted, her voice high and sure. Odella stopped short. Nolan didn't flinch. He looked at her, waiting. Odella knelt, arms open. Bertie barreled into her, burying her face in Odella's apron. Bo hovered behind. She's been calling you that since we left Alma's. You don't gotta answer if you don't want to. Odella pulled Bertie close, then looked at Bo. I want to. She stood, holding the girl's hand, and Nolan stepped beside her, the four of them framed by the porch rail and the sharp blue sky. Inside, the kettle began to whistle. Odella turned to Nolan. We've got time to make a life, he nodded. We've already started. The wedding took place 5 days later, under the cottonwoods behind the house. Alma brought a pie and her husband carved a bench from a fallen aspen for the children to sit on. Pastor Emery came with his Bible and a pressed collar that looked out of place next to the dust on his boots. Bo wore a necktie crooked enough to need fixing twice. Bertie had daisies braided into her hair and clutched Odella's hand the entire time, her thumb tracing the seam of Odella's glove like she needed to make sure it was real. When the vows were spoken, Nolan's voice didn't waver. He didn't say more than was needed, but each word sat solid between them, like stones in a riverbed. When the pastor gave his quiet nod, Nolan didn't hesitate. His hand found hers, and they stepped forward together. The children pressed to their sides as if they already understood something sacred had shifted. That night, after the guests rode home and the house settled into a hush, Odella stood in the room that had once been hers alone. Her trunk sat by the wall, half open. She hadn't unpacked everything back when she arrived, but now her apron hung beside his on the peg, and her shawl lay draped over the foot of the bed they would share. The window was open, letting in the scent of damp earth and the faint whinny of a horse turning in its stall. Nolan came in last, fingers still stained from the cedar wood he'd split that morning. He didn't speak right away, just crossed the room and took her hand, the same one she'd worn the ring on since the sun passed noon. I could build you a proper washstand, he said, nodding to the chipped basin near the wall. One with drawers. Birch, maybe? You don't have to do that, she said, though her fingers closed around his. I want to. You ought to have something that's yours, even if it sits next to mine. Odella looked up at him, the lines of his face lit soft by the lamplight. You don't know how long I went without anyone offering something just because they wanted to. I don't reckon you'll go without that again. She went to him then, not because she needed reassurance, but because she finally didn't. When he held her, it was without urgency. There was no rush to claim, no need to prove. Just breathe and warmth and the quiet joining of two people who had walked long roads to find one another. Days folded into one another as spring turned to early summer. The creek ran clear, and the fence lines held. Odella planted more onions than they'd ever eat, but Nolan didn't say a word. He just brought her a second sack of seed when he came back from town. One afternoon, she found Bo in the loft above the barn, sitting cross-legged with a folded newspaper. He looked up as she climbed the ladder, her legs stiff from kneeling too long in the garden. You hiding? She asked, easing onto the hay beside him. No, he said, then added, sorta. He handed her the paper. It was an old issue from a Helena press, the pages yellowing. A story was circled in pencil, something about a boy who'd built a homing trap for jackrabbits. You think it'd work? He asked, eyes bright. She read the lines over twice, then nodded slowly. If you used wire instead of string. And added something to draw them in mint, maybe. Bo grinned and for a moment looked more like a child than he had in weeks. Bertie says you hum when you cook, he said suddenly. She listens from the steps. I didn't know I did that. She thinks it sounds like our mama used to. Odella folded the paper and handed it back. You can keep listening if it helps. Bo didn't speak right away. Then quietly, "I think you're staying." "I am." A breeze rustled the hay, and Bo leaned against her side just enough to feel like trust. That evening, Nolan came in late, dust on his boots and a new tear in his shirt sleeve. Odella met him by the basin with a damp cloth. "Fence up near the ridge is down," he said. "Elk, maybe? I'll send Bo with water in the morning. You'll want more nails. I'll take him with me." She paused, cloth still in hand. "You trust him to help. He's yours now, too. I figure he should learn from both of us." Later, after the children were asleep and the house had gone still, Odella sat beside Nolan on the porch. The stars were just starting to salt the sky, and the lantern behind them cast long shadows across the boards. "Do you ever miss your old life?" he asked. "I didn't have a life, I had a duty." And now, she leaned her head against his shoulder, the wood of the swing creaking beneath them. "Now I have a place, a voice, and people worth waking up for." Nolan wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "Then I reckon we both ended up where we were meant to." "No," she said. "We ended up where we chose to be." And in the quiet that followed, in the steady breath between them, the world felt whole. The heat of late June settled heavy on the land, drawing out the scent of pine sap and dry earth. Odella rose before the sun that morning, not from habit, but because Birdie had kicked off her blanket in the night and crawled into their bed, pressing small toes into Odella's side. She shifted gently now, careful not to wake her, and padded barefoot to the wash basin. Through the window, the first pale light slipped between the trees. She tied her hair back and stepped outside, letting the door fall shut behind her without a sound. The air was cool still, the hush of dawn holding steady even as the rooster began to stir. She crossed the yard toward the coop, not for the eggs they'd gathered enough yesterday, but for a moment of stillness before the day began. Behind her, the door creaked open. "You always move that quiet in the morning?" Nolan asked, his voice still thick with sleep. "I try to," she said, not turning. "You just listen too well." He came up beside her, tugging on his suspenders. "Horses need water before the sun's up full. Want to walk with me? I'll bring a pail." They spoke little as they worked. The trough had gone low overnight, and the pump creaked in protest as they filled it. Nolan adjusted the straps on the harness hanging by the rail, and Odella ran her hand down the mare's neck, fingers brushing a burr caught in the mane. "You ever think about adding another?" she asked, flicking the burr loose. "Horse, child," he stilled, the leather strap in his hand falling slack. "I didn't mean now," she said quickly. "Just someday." He finished buckling the strap before answering. "I think about it. You were quiet just now. Not because I don't want more, because I didn't expect you'd ask." "I wouldn't have before," she said, "but I've been thinking, there's room and I'm not afraid of the work." He turned toward her then. "It wouldn't be just your work." "Not anymore. I know that." He stepped closer, brushing a thumb over the smudge of dirt on her cheekbone. "If it happens, it happens, and if not, we've got enough to fill the days." She leaned into his hand. "I'd like to leave that door open then." "Just in case." He nodded, and they stood like that, the horses shifting behind them, the sky brightening slow. Inside, Alma arrived just after breakfast with a basket of sewing scraps. Birdie ran to her, arms outstretched, and Bo lingered by the doorway, half curious about the new project. "Figured I'd show her how to piece a star block," Alma said, setting her basket down. "She's old enough." Odella poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one over. "She'll like that. She's been trying to stitch hearts into everything." "Bo could learn too," Alma added. "My brother made half our quilts growing up. Wouldn't admit it, but he liked the pattern work." Bo made no move, but his eyes flicked toward the basket, then away again. "I'll help you with the corners," Odella said, catching his gaze. "If you want to try." He shrugged, but stayed close, and by midday he was threading a needle with his tongue between his teeth and a look of almost hidden pride in his eyes. Nolan came in at supper time, smelling of sun and sweat and alfalfa. His hands were scratched from fence wire, but he kissed her temple as he passed, and she felt his fingers brush against hers as she set down the stew pot. That night, with the children asleep and the house darkened, she sat beside him on the porch again, her feet tucked beneath her and her head resting on his shoulder. "You remember when you asked me why I sent that letter?" she said. "I do. I've been thinking. I didn't really know why, not then. I said I was tired of being alone, that was true, but I think what I really wanted was to stop feeling like I had to earn my place in the world every day." He was quiet, listening. "I don't feel that way anymore," she said. "You never made me prove anything. You just let me be. You were already enough," he said. "The rest was just time." She turned to him. "Do you think this is it? What comes next, I mean?" "I think this is the part where it stops feeling like waiting," he said, "and starts feeling like living." She kissed him then, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't need questions after. That summer stretched long and golden. The garden gave more than they expected, and Beau built his jackrabbit trap with mint tucked in the corners. He caught one and let it go again, more interested in the building than the catching. Birdie finished her star block and asked if she could make one for the baby if a baby ever came. Odella said yes, and kept the square in a drawer by the bed. In early September, Alma brought over a bundle of flannel and a spindle of blue thread. "Just in case," she said, and Odella didn't ask who had told her. It didn't matter. She hemmed a blanket from it anyway, her stitches steady, her heart full. That winter, the snow came late but heavy, blanketing the hills and quieting the world. They kept the fire going through the worst of it, and the children took turns reading aloud from the one book Beau had salvaged from a schoolhouse shelf the year before. Odella spent more time inside now, her belly rounding gentle beneath her apron. Nolan brought her tea without asking and rubbed her ankles at night, never mentioning how tired he was from the woodpile. One night, when the wind howled against the windows and the world outside turned white and muffled, she whispered, "I didn't think I'd ever feel safe enough to let go." "You don't have to hold so tight anymore," he whispered back. "I've got you." In spring, the baby came another girl with dark hair and a cry that sounded like defiance. They named her June for the month that first made them a family. Beau carved her a rattle from pine. Birdie sang to her softly, off-key and earnest. Odella held her close, breathing in her warmth, and looked over at Nolan standing in the doorway, his arms crossed, his eyes full. "We're whole now," he said. She nodded, tears caught at the edge of her smile, and they were.